Picture on the lower right there is a little bit dated picture of the Kenora Separation Rapids site. There's a little bigger hole there now. We took a bulk sample out last winter, but that's where we're located. Okay, so what is sustainable development or sustainability? I think if you were to ask 10 people that question, you get 10 different answers. But the term sustainable development really got its first solid definition back in 1987. And it means development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The evolution of sustainability in mining on the assumption that you consider health and safety being sustainable, and I do that because obviously if you're hurting your workers, you're not a very sustainable organization. Back in the 70s and early 80s, and even before that, but there was a huge focus on health and safety. And that was where there's been some tremendous strides. And really now it's just been fine tuning since then. I mean, the lockout tagout procedure is still a lockout tagout procedure. But in the early 80s and into the 2000s, there was a much larger increase on environmental performance and the development of new technologies and a lot of research that went on and going in those days. And it's got to the point now where mines now have to monitor for both water quality, but also we have to have a water flea called Daphnia and rainbow trout tests in our effluents on a regular basis, and those animals have to live in 100% effluent. And I would challenge you today that couldn't exist at your typical parking lot in the spring, in particular, with all the salt that's coming off. So we've come a long ways from the where we were in the 1980s. But since then, and in the last 10 or 15 years, community and Indigenous engagement and participation in mining has become much more upfront. There's been a recent trend to work towards getting more women in mining and other minority groups as well, whether they be culturally different groups or even the LGBTQ community. And I'm pleased to say that Avalon has all those groups in our mining projects. I'm not going to read all this, and I just wanted to throw that up here as an example of what sustainability policy might look like. This is the Avalon one. The top basically says why we do it, and then we break down the policy into 4 different areas. One is health and safety, one is the environment, one is community, and the 4th one, not commonly in sustainability policies, is our own people and how we look after our people and treat our people. Okay, so what does sustainability mean to Avalon and I think most modern mining companies? Well, obviously health, safety, and social responsibility and leadership in those areas are corporate cornerstones. It's the way we do business, and it's not just because it's the right thing to do. There are economic advantages to doing that. It enhances our reputation and ability to attract quality people and keep them. Enables us to get new resources. Permits are easier to get when you've got a good reputation. You get access to capital when you're known to be sustainable a little easier. And it allows us to better identify and manage our opportunities and our risks if we are fully sustainable. So sustainability doesn't just happen. There's a lot of work to making a company sustainable, and it really starts at the top. We as the senior management team set sustainability goals and targets every year, and those are reviewed and approved by the board of directors. It makes sure that we get the resources we need to do our sustainability initiatives, but it also means we're regularly reporting on them to the guys that sign our paychecks. And the other thing that we do is we report on these targets and objectives in our annual sustainability report. Avalon's been doing this for, I think, 10 years now. We're the only exploration and development company that does these comprehensive reports, although there are 1 or 2 that are now starting to come out from the literally thousands of other exploration and development companies out there. So we're quite proud of that. But there's also, there's ways and means for me wanting to do this sort of thing. There's nothing better than letting people know that their name's going to be reported on whether or not they met their sustainability objective at the end of the year than to have a nice public report. So it all helps us to develop the culture and make sure that we're doing sustainability things correct. right now, as an exploration and development company, there aren't very many, solid sustainability targets that we can work at, although I'll talk about a few down the road. But some of the traditional ones like water or energy per ton of product, you can't do that in exploration. But we're trying to do other ways and looking for targets and designing our projects to have leading edge performance compared to our competitors at this stage. It's a lot easier to do it when you're designing than to have to retrofit a process after the fact. Management continually reviews our sustainability issues. Senior compensation for some of us are linked to our sustainability targets, and when we get into production, there will be, the whole senior management team's paycheck will depend on them being meeting their sustainability targets. This is fairly common in the industry now for some, or at least for some of the big companies. And again, like I said, it's not just having a fancy sustainability policy. You got to have all the governance and management systems in behind that to back it up. And that's where the real work is, and that's where the rubber hits the road. So besides the sustainability policy, there's a lot of other supporting policies that you can see on our webpage, things like the ethics to drug and alcohol. Risk management policy and program. This is something I can't underestimate. It's one of the most powerful tools that you can have to make sure that you are not hurting people, that you're not having environmental incidents, and you're having good relationships with your community and Indigenous partners. Everyone at Avalon participates in this in one way, shape, or form. Everybody out in the field does a risk assessment every morning before they go out into the field to identify the risks that they're dealing with and to prepare for them and to manage them where they do exist, to make sure that you're preventing accidents. And that's one of the most powerful tools. Just doing safety stats or analyzing historical accidents, yeah, that's useful, but it's after the fact. And what you want to try and do is prevent accidents. And that's why the risk management program is such a powerful tool. It's one of many, but there are lots of other metrics that are what we would call leading indicators as opposed to lagging indicators. Leading indicators are things like you're doing your regular inspections as you're supposed to do versus you had 2 lost time accidents last year. Well, you can see which one is measuring the things that are going to prevent accidents than actually reporting them after the fact. We're quite proud of our annual sustainability report. Again, you can see all 9, 10, or 11, whatever there are out on our webpage now. Like I say, we're the only company, I think, that does this kind of comprehensive reporting. Others are starting to follow our lead. But the Mining Association of Canada has their Towards Sustainable Mining. I invite you to take a look at their webpage. It's a very powerful tool to make sure that you've got all the management systems in place for a wide variety of protocols, everything from environment to tailings dams, for example. Health and safety. Okay, I'll just briefly go through this, but basically the importance is to make sure you've got a proper safety culture and behaviors. You can have all the rules and regulations out there that you want, but there's always reasons why somebody might not follow a particular rule, like getting the job done faster. That's a good thing, right? But no, it puts people at risk. So you got to have that right safety culture and behaviors. The rest of it's all sort of common sense. You got to make sure people are aware of the risks and that they've been properly trained. You're looking at not just health and safety, but not just safety, but health and hygiene risks as well. Not many of those in exploration and development, but as you get into processing and operations, you have more of those. You want to make sure that we're supporting your people and the local communities. Now, as an exploration and development company, we're not building clinics or things like that, but we have sponsored radio programs, for example, to address a problem of abuse in the homes when we were having a bit of problem like that in the Northwest Territories. Not us, but the mining industry. We are we're monitoring the performance not just of our own people, but our contractors, suppliers, partners, and customers. All of these folks are required to fill out a sustainability questionnaire if they have health, safety, environment, and community risks before they're allowed to be a customer or a contractor for us. So we send those out to those folks up front. If they aren't meeting our standards, well, sometimes we will support them in getting them up to our level of performance. And And other times we just say, well, I'm sorry, we're going to go with this other guy who is already there. We regularly report on the health and safety incidents and making sure we're taking corrective measures, having done the investigations following them. Aboriginal community engagement, much bigger and much more important nowadays. You've seen in the news lots of cases where disputes between local communities or Indigenous peoples are actually stopping mining companies. My apologies, I see the word Aboriginal there. That's it should be Indigenous now. That's the more appropriate modern term. But basically, you have to transparently engage. You got to engage early, and you got to do it through the life of the project. It's all about earning trust. Really, that's what it comes down to, and listening so that you know what the people's priorities are, and making sure you're responding to them. We'd like to see participation, and while it's difficult for Indigenous groups to participate in the multi-billion-dollar projects, for our projects where it's $20 or $25 million, it's really quite possible nowadays for Indigenous peoples to have meaningful participation in our companies, basically being owners of our projects. And we really like to encourage that and make them part of the game. Again, you also have to respect customs and their cultures. And you need to make sure that you're dealing with the governments and all the local authorities, your NGOs, and other interested parties, and hence why I'm here with you today. We want to maintain a long-term support for key community initiatives, and again, you have to listen to see what those are, and they vary. I remember in a project in Africa I was working on, we thought, well, the local people have these really terrible little mud huts with thatched roofs, and they really probably want new homes. So we got all ready to build all their own homes, and really, when we started listening to them, what they wanted was education for their kids. They were perfectly happy in their homes. The climate was great there. They were comfortable. What they wanted was education for the kids. So you really have to listen and pay attention. At Avalon, we have a solid reputation of success in this area. We initially signed MOUs when we first go on site. We can't promise anything great because we don't know whether we're going to find enough ore to have a mine. But at some point, we will say, okay, look, we'll sign this MOU. If we do find a mine, we will have an accommodation agreement with you. It needs to be called impact benefit agreements. I don't like IBAs now because it assumes negative impacts. And I think generally speaking nowadays, when mining is done right, you have more benefits than impact. So calling them accommodation agreements where we work with communities to make sure that we have a win-win situation. Our accommodation agreements usually give first crack at jobs and contracts. It involves community investment in their priority programs. We provide bursaries frequently to students in the communities. And as I mentioned, we were the first mining company that I believe actually offered equity in our project in the Northwest Territories, where again it was a creative financial agreement whereby they actually the three major companies actually own 10% of our corporation. It's a lot better if you're getting 10% of a few $100 million of profit than if you're just getting a couple $100,000 as a grant. So having an ownership in a company is a far more powerful tool and far more beneficial to the local Indigenous communities. And finally, our people. Again, we need a workplace that's based on mutual respect, fairness, and integrity. Their core values at Avalon. We want to encourage people to be innovative because that's very important in our industry, particularly the critical metals, because it's just evolving so quickly, and to grow with the organization over the long term. So that means we want to support diversity. And again, we have 2 women on our board. We have 1 woman on our management team. Our last exploration program, 3 of the 8 women and people in the field were women, and 4 of the 8 were Indigenous employees. So we're serious about doing this and supporting the local communities and you know the initiatives that are ongoing in the world and in mining. Again, open and timely communications, particularly in times of change. Making sure our personal information is kept private. Communicating what's happening within the company on an ongoing basis. operating in a drug and alcohol-free workplace. No discrimination, harassment, violence, or bullying are permitted. This is kind of standard in Ontario, but you'd be surprised how there are still complaints out there, and we're very cognizant of that, and spend a lot of effort to make sure that doesn't occur. And if we do fail in all that and people get unhappy, we will support the employees' right to freedom of association, which basically means if they want to have a union, they can have a union. It kind of means we've maybe failed a little bit, but we're hoping to keep our people happy and not have to have that. There are a lot of historical mining operations where they went in and they got phosphate, or they got copper or something like that. But 15 years ago, they didn't even look for rare earth elements or lithium or many of the other critical metals that didn't have a market back then. Some of these sites are in pretty bad shape and weren't properly rehabilitated because the rules weren't strong enough, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So we have an opportunity to go back to these mine sites, relook at them, and look for the critical metals that weren't looked for in the past, and rehabilitate those sites while making some money on these new markets. And we've got 2 projects like that. We have a old phosphate mine that needs to be, well, it's been partially rehabilitated, but there's more rehabilitation that needs to be done. We believe we can do that while recovering both phosphate with modern technologies and rare earth elements. And I'll talk to you a little bit about our tin project out east in a minute. We're implementing new technologies too. The modern technologies are much better than they were even 10 years ago, but certainly much better than they were 20 or 30 years ago. Grindings are more accurate and more consistent. There are new ways of processing different minerals and metals. The reagents have gotten better, and the way we add them have gotten better. So technology has made tremendous advances, and similarly, the water treatment technologies and our discharges are far better than they used to be. So our effluents are completely non-toxic and don't have any environmental impacts. The other thing is that if you've already got the material that's already been mined, you've got the waste rock or the tailings that's already on the ground, well, then the mining of those and processing of these becomes much cheaper. It becomes, there's less waste, you can rehabilitate, and of course, since you don't have to do all that crushing and grinding, you're going to have a far lower energy footprint as well. So there's lots of advantages to doing this kind of work. At East Kemptville, there was a mine that shut down in 1992 when the price of tin dropped. Since then, the local surface rights owner has been treating acid mine drainage. There was a lot of sulfur in the ore in the tailings, and it's been generating acid and zinc and other metals in the runoff from the tailings and the waste or low-grade ore stockpiles. And they've been effectively treating them, but we believe that there's an opportunity to go back in there to mine some of the ore and reprocess the stockpile with new technology, because what was low grade back then is actually ore now, because we can recover things more efficiently. And our plan will be to fully rehabilitate the site. We'll have no increase in the footprint. You can see on the upper left side there's the tailings pond and the stockpile. On the lower left, you see the water treatment pond. We can use some of that, as you see below in the light green, for early wastes. And then we can go into the 2 pits and mine for a while. We can mine the stockpile, remove all of the acid generating materials. And then while we're processing the fresh ore, we can make a very clean tailings cover. We can make a low permeability so that the water goes through it at an incredibly slow rate, and low sulfur. We can take all the sulfur out and make a very clean cover. And we can put that on top of the tailings, and it's like putting a complete, I call it the upside down mason jar approach. You're putting a cover on it so that anything that happens inside there will stay there in perpetuity, forever. So basically we can, by using modern technology, take an existing environmental problem, and it's actually going to become more difficult to treat as it cleans up. It'll be generating acid mine drainage for another 40 years or so. and we believe that we can walk away from that with no treatment in about 15 or 16 years by reprocessing the site. Here's a new technology that we're working at. We can use it at Separation Rapids. We can also use it at East Kempville, but it's called sensor-based ore sorting. It used to start with just looking at different colors. Now these sensors are much more high tech. You can look at densities. Sometimes you can actually identify specific minerals. And as you can see in the picture, what happens is the ore rolls off of a conveyor belt. There's a detector that identifies either the color or the density or the mineral, and there's a puff of air then that hits that particular particle, and that particle then goes to the left-hand bin, and the stuff that isn't identified goes into the right-hand bin. So suddenly you've got a concentration of the ore, which means that everything on the left bin you don't have to crush or grind for further processing. So you save a ton of energy, you save reagents and all that sort of thing. But what's really cool about this technology is there's no water use and there's no chemical use at all. Avalon is focusing on the critical metals. These are 17 metals, some of which you're familiar. Copper and nickel, for example, are considered critical metals because they're also important in the green energy technologies, the solar panels or the control panels, or all sorts of things, batteries. But a lot of them, like the rare earth elements and the lithiums, are very small markets. So a little out of date now, but I think a year and a half ago, a whole year's lithium production was equivalent to about 15 minutes of iron ore production. So small markets, a lot of the big companies aren't really interested in getting these, into these small markets. A copper mine may mill 300,000 or 400,000 tons of ore a year, and the whole lithium market was 200 in one day. They'll do 200, 300, 400,000 tons a day, and the whole annual lithium production is about 200,000 tons. So it gives you a kind of a perspective. That's why companies like Avalon, some smaller companies, are much more interested in these smaller markets. Some of these critical metals are also sulfur-free. So they don't have the sulfur in them, so there's no possible for acid mine drainage. In fact, there's no heavy metals in them, so you don't have any copper or nickel or iron getting out into the environment. And that's exactly the case that we have at Separation Rapids. This rock is so clean. The ore is, we can use it for gravel or aggregate, or sorry, the waste we can use for gravel or aggregate, and the ore, as you saw in the picture in the first slide, is sitting right there on surface. It's not doing any environmental damage, and it's for me, it's been the easiest mine I've ever had to permit because it's just so simple. You really only have to worry about making sure you handle your reagents properly because the rock itself is very, very clean. So here's an example. Your typical gold mine will often have about 99.5% of the ore that they process as waste, a huge amount. So they have huge tailings dams. Some are a little better than that, but not much. Your typical copper nickel mine, the ore will be at 2 to 4% nickel or copper. So the rest of it is going to end up as waste. Whereas at Separation Rapids, because of the feldspar and maybe quartz and the lithium concentrate that we'll be producing, we'll only have 10% of the ore as waste. That means our dams are smaller. Our dams are going to be made out of rock. They won't be made out of tailings like a lot of the dams that have failed that you've seen in the news in the last years. Those tailings dams were actually made with tailings. We will be using the waste rock that is clean and inert to build all our dams, and we're building them on bedrock. So much, much safer operation and much, much lower risk and low environmental impact. As I mentioned, we're committed to be carbon neutral by 2050. I think we can, particularly at Separation Rapids, be there a lot sooner than that. Ontario Hydro is pretty clean. It's about 93% clean energy from hydro and nuclear. The other 7% is from non-clean sources. Our biggest source of greenhouse gas will not be the electrical energy that we purchase from the local dams, which are 100% energy, carbon free. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works in Ontario, because if we buy and use the local carbon free energy, that means someone else is buying the non-carbon free. So we carry that burden. But regardless, we don't have to offset very much from the electrical supply. Our big our big greenhouse gas emitters is the diesel that is used in the mining equipment. And as you're well aware, there are more and more mines that are becoming underground mines in particular that are diesel free. All of their mining equipment is run by battery. And because our mine is small, the only issue we have right now is they don't have 50-ton trucks, which are slightly larger than your typical dump truck you see driving around town. We'd like to be able to get a 50-ton truck. Those don't exist yet, but we could probably get away with some smaller trucks that are electrical battery operated. But we think by the time we're running, there'll be a 50-ton electric truck. And so all of our mining equipment, our drills, our loaders, and all those sorts of things right now are available as battery operated. And all we need to do is continue to push for the electric trucks. So again, we're building this into our design. And we're not just talking about this. 10 years ago, or close to 10 years ago, we were the first exploration and development company that used solar at an exploration development site. We had a huge savings in heating and in our drill programs, and it's becoming more and more popular in the rest of the world. How am I doing for time, by the way? I guess we're pretty good at it. Basically, when you have a place like Nechalacho where it's 50 below in the wintertime and dark almost dark almost all night long, we didn't know whether this would work. Sure enough, there is enough light that we can power batteries with the solar, and what that allowed us to do is have a backup power supply for the diesel generators. Historically, we couldn't use high energy efficient heaters because they needed an electrical energy supply. And if your diesel generator went down and you didn't have that electrical energy, you lost all your heat in camp. So we had these old, never say die, reliable, inefficient, tent heaters. Now we have the high energy efficient heaters that have more than 2 temperatures, which are too hot and too cold that the old ones had. And we have huge energy savings. We are the only exploration development company that I am aware of at this point in time that has been reporting our GHG emissions for the past 8 years. And in fact, we gave our reporting system to the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada to use, to give out to their members. And it's a very simple system whereby you just plug in the amount of diesel and gas and whatever that you use, and it'll calculate what GHG that you're using, and also let you know when you need to be reporting to the government. And we gave them some case studies on how to minimize your energy use and where your big energy uses are, and therefore how to be more energy efficient. And then finally, you have to give a little back. We recently donated 10,000 to the Bamatong First Nation for COVID-19 personal protective equipment, and that was matched by, I think it was Manulife, or certainly one of the insurance companies. So we helped them with their COVID issues. We do a lot of presentations and talks about mining and sustainability at schools, universities, conference, industry associations. I failed to mention on one of the earlier slides a shot of our CEO speaking at one of the local high school graduation ceremonies. Again, we've helped with PDAC sustainability issues. We've provided university bursaries that are linked to research at our projects. We've given safety and training programs to Indigenous peoples, and we have rehabilitated historic mining environmental disturbances at some of our projects, such as in the Nechalacho project in the Northwest Territories, as part of our drilling programs. So that's in a nutshell what we do at Avalon. This is just kind of an overview to show the interrelationships between economics, environmental stewardship, and social responsibility. You need to be doing all of these things nowadays to be an efficient mining company. I think Avalon does them pretty well, and we're pleased to be developing the separation raft project up there in Kenora.